Hello there. Let us continue with the left aligned right angle triangle subcategory. In the last video, we had solved these 7 questions and we stopped with these 7 questions because had we continued and since we had 6 more questions to solve, the length of the video would have been very long. So this is part 2 of that video. And if you've not checked that video out, you can do so by clicking the card that is appearing in the top right corner of your screen. So with that said and done, let's continue and let's solve the 8th question from the list, which is this. So this is what we are supposed to print given the value of n is 5. What we are doing is in the first row, we are printing 5. That is when I is 0, print 5. When I is 1, that is in the second row, print 4 and 5, right? When I is 2, we are printing 3, 4 and 5. So if we take a look, we would notice that what we are printing is not really related to the value of I, correct? And we can say the same thing about J because when J is 0, we are printing 5 in the first row, 4 in the second row, 3 in the third, 2 in fourth, and 1 in fifth. Similarly, when J is 1, we are printing different values depending on which row we are on, correct? So what we are printing is not really related to I directly or related to J directly, but there has to be some pattern, right? Which is what we will try to find. So let's go row by row. So what we see is when I is 0, we print 5. When I is 1, we start from 4 and stop at 5, right? When I is 2, we start from 3 and we stop at 5. When I is 3, we start from 2, stop at 5. When I is 4, we start from 1 and stop at 5. So this one pattern that we can notice, which is we are ending at 5 every time, correct? Now, where we are starting is something that we are yet to figure out. Because if we do that, we can just take that starting point and go from there to 5, correct? So, for example, if we know somehow that the starting point here is 2, we can print 2 and in the next column, in the same row, we can print 3, which is just plus 1 of the last value. And we can do the same thing for the next column, print 4, and ultimately print 5, right? So we can say that the end value is 5. Now we have to figure out the start value, right? So let us relate the start value with something that we can see. So start is 5 when I is 0. Start is 4 when I is 1, right? So can I say that when I is 0, start is 5. When I is 1, start is 4, right? When I is 2, start is 3, then 3, 2, and then 4, 1. So 2, 3, 3, 2, and 4, 1. Now observe this. What do you notice? You'll notice that when you add the value of I and the start value, what you get is a constant value, which is 5, right? So this holds for 0 plus 5, 1 plus 4, 2 plus 3, and all of these. Now, where is this 5 coming from? This 5 is coming from n. Since n is 5, this is 5. If n was 6, for example, this would have been 6 in all of these rows, right? So we can say that this is equal to n, which means that if I add I and what the start value should be, we ultimately get n, correct? So I can write it this way. I plus start is n. Now, does this mean that start is equal to n minus I? It does, right? So if I is 2, for example, start would be n, which is 5 minus 2, which is 3. So start is 3. Similarly, if I is 3, start will be 2, right? So this gave us our start value. So we can say that it is starting from n minus I and ending at n, right? So what will we have to do to solve this is, first of all, iterate for n number of times to get all of the rows, correct? And in each row, we need to calculate the start and end value, then iterate from start all the way up to end and print the current value, right? Which means the code would look something like this. the main loop will remain the same. That is, we are iterating from 0 all the way up to n. Then what are we going to do is we're going to calculate the start and end value. Start will be equal to n minus I and end will be equal to n itself. And then what are we going to do is we're going to say j is equal to start, then j less than equal to n, right? Because we need to go till the end value because we are printing the end value also. For example, if n is 5, we are printing 5, right? We're not stopping at 4. And that is why here we are saying j less than equal to n. And here we will just print the value of j, print a new line here, as in move the cursor to the new line and close the main loop. So with this code done, as in the logic discussed and the pseudocode done, let us go to IntelliJ. Let's expand nested loop pattern and right angle triangle left aligned. Let's create a new Java class here. Let's call it Q8. And here let's have a main method. Let's say n is equal to 5. Then what we have to do is we have to iterate from 0 all the way up to 4, right? In the main loop. And in each iteration of the main loop that will take care of the row, we'll have to say, as in we'll have to calculate start, which we know is equal to n minus I. Then we'll have to calculate end, which we know is equal to n. And then we can say for int j is equal to start, j less than is equal to end, j plus plus. Here, what we will have to do is we will have to print the value of j. And let's also leave a space after that. And let's have a println statement here. So with this, if I run the code, what do we get? We get 5, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the last row, which is exactly what we expected, right? Now, if we come back to the code, you would notice something. See, start is going to be n minus I in each and every row, right? So instead of calculating n minus I and storing in start, can we take this and replace this start with? We can, right? We can say for j is equal to n minus I. And actually, let's not modify this code. Let's quickly refactor this and rename this to solution 1. Then create another class. Let's call it Q8 solution 2. Let's grab the main method from here. Let's close this and let's paste. Now what we're going to do was copy this, that is the value of start, and just replace the usage of start variable with n minus I. And since this was the only usage of start variable, we can get rid of this variable altogether, right? And end is always going to be equal to n. So we can say j less than equal to n, right? So if I make these changes and then run the code, we should get the same output. And that is what is happening. We are getting the exact same output, right? So this code is also working absolutely fine. Now, the reason I started from this was because this was more intuitive. As in, if I would have reached this directly, it might have been a little confusing for you. But this was a little more intuitive. So we started with this and then we realized that there's only one usage of start, that is in the inner for loop. And what we can do is we can just replace the variable start with n minus I. And that is how we reach the second solution. So you can go with any one of these. It's just that I'm discussing both. So with this, we're done with the 8th question. And now we'll move on to the 9th question. So this is what we are supposed to print when n is equal to 5. Now the reason I did not remove 5 and then write e over here was because I wanted to relate what we had earlier with what we want to do now. So if you see, wherever we had 5, what are we replacing it with is E, right? That is the 5th letter of the English alphabet. All of the places where we had 4 is being replaced by D. All of the places where we had 3 will be replaced by C. All of the places we had 2 is going to be replaced by B, and 1 will be replaced by A, right? So what we have to figure out is, if I had 1, how am I going to print A instead. And if I had 2, how am I going to print B? Similarly, for 3, 4, and 5, how am I going to print C, D, and E respectively, right? Because if we can make this transformation, we will be able to use the exact same code, of course, with a little bit of modification to print this pattern, right? So this is pretty simple for you now, right? Wherever we had 1, we want A. So what we can do is we can print A plus 0, right? For B, what we can do is we can print A plus 1. Similarly, for C, we can print A plus 2. For D, we can print A plus 3. For E, we can print A plus 4. So A is common in all of these. The only thing that's changing is what we are adding with A. So wherever we had 1, we are adding 0. Wherever we had 2, we are adding 1. Wherever we had 3, we are adding 2, and so on, right? So if I assume that this is V, what's happening is for any given value of V, we are adding A V minus 1, right? So we can say A plus V minus 1. And if we make this change, we will be able to get A instead of 1, B instead of 2, C instead of 3, D instead of 4, and E instead of 5, right? So with this understood, let us go back to IntelliJ and let's create a new Java class. First of all, let's name this Java class as Q9. And what am I going to do is grab the main method from Q8 solution2 and paste here. Now we are printing J over here, right? What we need to do is instead of printing J, we are going to print A plus V minus 1, that is J minus 1 here. So we'll say A plus J minus 1, and we will wrap this in a pair of parentheses and we will typecast this to char, right? And if I run the code, this is what we get: E, then DE, then CDE, then BCDE, and lastly ABCDE, which is exactly what we wanted, correct? So with this, we have solved this question as well. Now moving on to the next question. So for n is equal to 5, this is what we are supposed to print, right? So what's happening is in the first row, print 1, second row, print 2 and 3. Third row, print 4, 5, 6. Then print 7, 8, 9, 10. And then print 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the solution to this is pretty simple, right? We will have to start from one number, which is 1. And then we will increment that number by 1 every time. And then print that number, correct? So when we are here, we will print 1. Then increment 1 so that it becomes 2. And then when we are here, we will print 2. Then increment 2 so that it becomes 3. Then when we are here, we will print 3. We'll do the same thing, increment 3 so that it becomes 4, print 4 here, then 5, then 6, then 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 ultimately, right? So what will we have to do is take a variable, say num, initialize this to 1. Then inside the loop, we will print num and we will increment the value of num so that num has the value that is supposed to be printed, right? So with this clear, let's go to IntelliJ. Let us create a new Java class. Let's call it Q10. Let's grab the main method from Q9 and let's paste it here. And let's have a variable called num over here, which is initialized to 1. Now what are we going to print inside the inner for loop is num with a space, right? And we should also increase the value of num by 1 so that when the next time it is to be printed, it has got the accurate value, right? So if I run the code, I get this. And although the output looks correct, the alignment does not. And it's happening because what's happening until here is we're printing a 1-digit number with 1 space, so total of 2 spaces. But here we're printing a 2-digit number with 1 space, so a total of 3 spaces. And to take care of this, what we can do is we can use system.out.printf, right? We had done something similar when we were dealing with this question. Wait a minute. This one and this one, right? So for this question, what are we going to do is we're going to say system.out.printf, and here I'll specify the format first of all with this. So I'm saying I want to print an integer in a width of 3 spaces. So even if the integer is just 1 digit long, it will reserve 3 spaces for that integer, right? And then I'll have to specify where am I going to give that integer from. That is where that integer is stored. In our case, it is stored in a variable called num. So we'll say num. And if I run the code now, this looks properly aligned. Of course, what's happening over here is it is towards the right. So we have got 3 spaces where 11 is getting printed, right? And what's happening is this is aligned towards the right. The same thing is happening over here. And if I recall right, if I put minus over here, this will get left aligned. So if you're familiar with C, you would understand this concept. In my understanding comes from C, where we specify the format and we specify the alignment with the help of minus sign. So no minus sign means it will be right aligned, and minus sign means it will be left aligned. So with this, again, running the code, we see that we are getting the output, and that seems perfectly aligned to me. So with this, we have discussed one of the solutions to this question. And I'm saying one of the solutions because there's another solution. And to discuss that, let's come back over here. Now, what did we do in the previous solution was we kept track of num this way, right? We said num will start from 1, and every time num gets printed, it will get increased by 1 so that it gets printed again. And then once it gets printed, it will get increased by 1 again. And that is how it will continue, right? But if we take a look at whatever we have over here, what would we notice is in the first row, we're printing just one number, which is starting from 1. And in the second row, we're printing two numbers. So it is starting from 2. So if I keep that information as well over here, that is the number of numbers that are getting printed and the start value. What will we have for the first row? We're printing just one number starting from 1. For the second row, we are printing two numbers starting from 2. Third row, we're printing three numbers starting from 4. Fourth row, printing four numbers starting from 7. And fifth row, printing seven numbers starting from 11. And the end value in each of these cases would be 1, 3, 6, 10, and 15, right? That is what we can observe here, correct? So take a look at this and see if you can find some pattern over here. One which should be pretty obvious is the end value, which is that end value will depend on the start value plus the number of numbers that we are printing, right? So for example, in third row, if we start from 4 and we are supposed to print three values, we will print 4, 5, and 6, right? So that will give us the end value. And here, if we also take the values of I into consideration, it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So what can we write about the end value? The end value will be equal to the start value plus the number of numbers that we have to print minus 1, right? So what I mean is, if I take the start value as 7 and the number of numbers that I'm supposed to print as 4, it will be 7 plus 4 minus 1, which is equal to 10, right? Which is what the end value is, right? Now, if you notice, I and number of numbers that we are printing is also related. The value of I will be equal to number of number that we are printing minus 1. So if number of numbers we are printing is 2, I is 1. If it is 3, I is 2, and so on, right? So we can replace this number of numbers that we are printing minus 1 with I. And if I do that, it will still hold, right? So if you see, end is 6, start is 4, I is 2, it holds, correct? Similarly, if I add 1 and 2, I get 3. So it holds here as well, and here, and here, and in every case, right? So we have something to get started with. That is, the end value will depend on the start value plus the value of I. Now in this, we know what I will be, because when we iterate, we will have access to the value of I. But what about the value of start? We won't have access to the value of start, right? And what happens in these cases is when we iterate in a nested loop to print some patterns, all we will have access to is the value of I, the value of j, and also the value of n, which is 5 in this case, right? So our attempt would be to find the value of start and the value of end in terms of I and j and n, right? So this would be a good starting point, by the way. We can conclude that n will always be equal to start plus I. Now, let us take a look at the start values in each of these cases. So the start value is 2 in row number 2, right? And the start value is 2 because the end value of the previous row is 1. Similarly, the start value here is 4, and that's because the end value of the previous row was 3. Start value is 7 because end value here was 6. So what does this tell you? This tells you that the start value in any given row will be the end value of the previous row plus 1, right? So can I say that start value of a given row, so Si, where I starting from 0 and going all the way up to n minus 1, will be equal to the end value of the previous row plus 1, right? So this is another relation that we have got. So we've got rough idea of what the end value and the start value would be. But again, like I said, we'll have to represent this using I, j, and n at max. So let us try and observe the pattern that we are printing over here. And from this equation, you can tell if you figure out how to represent the end value in terms of I, you'll also be able to figure out how to represent the end value of the previous row. And if you can represent this in terms of I, you'll be able to figure out the start value in terms of I, right? So if you have the start value in terms of I, the end value will become pretty simple. All you'll have to do is just add I to it, right? And keep in mind that in these cases, I is starting from 1 and going all the way up to n minus 1, right? So if we take a look at this, what would we notice is the first row started at 1 and ended at 1. So it took one number, right? The second row would start at 2 and will end at 3. So it took the next two numbers, right? So the first row took one number because we needed only one number. The second row took two numbers starting from 2. So it took the next two numbers, which means so far we have taken 1 plus 2 numbers when we are on the second row, right? Which means we have taken 3 numbers in total. And because we have taken 3 numbers in total, the end value over here is 3. Similarly, if we go to the third row, what would we see is it started from 4, and that is why the end value is 6, which means by the time we are on the third row and we have completed the third row, we have taken one number in the first row, right? Two more numbers in the second row and three more numbers in the third row. So if we start from 1, we need a total of 6 numbers, right? So we need 1 plus 2 plus 3 numbers. And that is why we have got 6 over here. Similarly, we'll get the same conclusion here and here as well, right? Which means given we are on row number 3, what we will have to do to determine the end value is go for 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, right? So what I said was, given we are on row number 3, we have to go for 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, correct? If we were on row number 4, we would have to go for 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, right? Which means that if we are on row number I, we'll have to go for 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus so on up to I plus 1. So if I generalize and write this, what will we get? We will get this. If we are on row number I, and again, I starts from 0, goes all the way up to n minus 1. What we will have to do to get the end value is start from 1 and go all the way up to I plus 1, right? So with this, we will be able to figure out the end value. Now, if you take a look at this, and for simplicity, let us substitute this to k. If we take a look at this, what is this? This is the sum of first k natural numbers, right? And we have a formula for that, which is k plus, k multiplied with k plus 1 whole divided by 2, correct? This is the sum of first k natural numbers. So because I substituted I plus 1 with k, if I substitute I plus 1 back here, what will we get? We'll get I plus 1 multiplied with I plus 1 plus 1 whole divided by 2, right? And this is going to give me the value of sk or si plus 1 as I plus 1 multiplied with I plus 2 whole divided by 2, right? Now let me clear all of this. So what did we get? We knew that if we are on row number I, to find the end value, we have to go for 1 plus 2 plus so on up to I plus 1. And this is the formula to replace this. So can we say that if we are on row number I, to get the end value, that is, let's say EI, we can do this. We can, right? So let me first of all clear everything else that is not required over here, and let's continue the discussion. So given that we know how to find the end value on any row I, let us quickly substitute a few values of I and see that what we get from here is the same as what we got over here, right? So if I take I as 0, what will the value of EI be? So this will be 0 plus 1, which is 1. This will be 0 plus 2, which is 2. So 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the end value is 1, right? And if I come back over here, this is what I see. The end value is 1. Now, if I put I as 1, what will we get? This will be 1 plus 1, which is 2. This will be 1 plus 2, which is 3. So 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. 6 by 2 is 3. So end value is 3. And that is what we have over here. So let us quickly do this for 2, 3, and 4 also. So if I substitute I as 2, this will be 3, this will be 4. 3 into 4 is 12, by 2 is 6. If I do the same thing for I is equal to 3, this will be 4 multiplied with 520 by 2 is 10. And if I do the same thing for I is equal to 4, this will be 5 multiplied with 6, which is 30. 30 by 2 is 15. So we've got 1, 3, 6, 10, 15. And that's exactly what we had over here. So we have successfully found out an expression using which we can calculate the end value. And this expression uses I, which is something that we will have access to when we iterate, right? So with this, we have found out n. Now, let's take a look at the formula that we had written for the start value. Now, for the start value of a given row, it will be the end value of the previous row plus 1, right? So before we get to that, let me quickly clear all of this. So I had said the start value in the current row will be the end value in the previous row plus 1. And that makes sense, right? The start value in row number 4 will be equal to end value in row number 3 plus 1, correct? So if I take this expression, that is Si is equal to Ei minus 1 plus 1. So I take Si is equal to Ei minus 1 plus 1. Now, given that we know how to calculate Ei, can I calculate Ei minus 1? We can, right? What we will have to do is, we'll have to substitute these I over here with I minus 1. So if I do that, what do we get? We have got I plus 1. So instead of I, we will put I minus 1. So we'll get I minus 1 plus 1. So we will have I minus 1 plus 1. Then we have got I plus 2. It will be I minus 1 plus 2. So I minus 1 plus 2 is going to give me I plus 1. And this will actually be just I. So it will be I multiplied with I plus 1 by 2 plus 1, right? That is what the formula of Si will be. Let me write it properly. I multiplied by I plus 1 by 2 plus 1, right? Because Si will be equal to Ei minus 1 plus 1. So that is why this is what we get. Now, if you take a look at the start value, that is the expression that we have to calculate the start value, this is also using just I, which is something we will have access to when we iterate. So if we use these two formulas, we will be able to calculate the start and end value in each row, right? Now, once we have the start and the end value, all that we will have to do is start from the start value and keep on printing all the way up to the end value. Then go to the next row, calculate the start and end again, and start from the start value and keep on printing until the end value, right? So taking all of this into consideration, now we can write the code. So for that, let's go to IntelliJ and let's first of all refactor and rename this to Q10 solution 1. And let me create a new Java class. Let's name this as Q10 solution 2. And here let's have a main method. The first thing I'll do is create a variable n and then we'll start the loop. So we'll say for int I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Now what are we supposed to do here is we're supposed to find the start and the end value for each value of I, right? So we will create two variables, int start and int end. Now the formula for start was I multiplied with I plus 1 divided by 2 plus 1, right? And the formula for end was I plus 1 multiplied with I plus 2 whole divided by 2. So with start and end calculated, what we will have to do is start from start, go all the way up to end with an increment of 1, and then we'll have to print j with a space. And we'll leave an empty println statement over here. So if I run the code, let's see the output, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, which is exactly what we got in solution 1 as well. Of course, the alignment was different. And if you want to keep the same alignment, you can copy this, come back here, paste this over here, replace num with j, and get rid of this print statement. So if I run the code now, even the alignment matches over here. So this is how we can solve this question using this logic, right? Now let's take a look at the next question, which is this. And this question would tell you that why did I go for the second solution even though we had this solution ready and working. So in the question that we're going to solve now, you see that we've got 1 and then we've got 3, 2. Then we've got 4, 5, 6. Then we've got 10, 9, 8, 7. And then we've got 11 to 15, which is in a way similar to the previous question. That is the question that we solved just now, right? It's just that in the second row and in the fourth row, we're not printing from start to end. We're printing from end to start, right? So we can use the same logic that we had discussed over here, but instead of going from start to end, we will go from end to start, and we won't do that for each of the rows. We will do that only for those rows which are in the even number position, right? So let's come back over here and let's understand what will we have to do. And for that, let me quickly draw the grid. So this is what we're trying to print. And as you can see, we've got 1 over here and numbers from 2 to 3, of course, in the reverse order in the second row, then 4, 5, 6, then numbers from 7 to 10 in the reverse order, and lastly 11 to 15, right? So the start and end calculation can remain the same. It's just that when I is 1 or 3 or 5 or so on, we will have to reverse the printing of the number. That is, we won't start from 2 and go all the way up to 3. We'll start from 3 and go all the way up to 2. The same thing when I is 3. So this check is pretty simple. All we will have to do is check if I is an odd number or not, right? If I is an even number, print in the same way. If I is an odd number, just reverse it, right? So what will we do to solve this? For that, let's come back to IntelliJ and let's close these two. Let's create a Java class called Q11. And what am I going to do is grab Q10 solution 2. That is the main method of Q10 solution 2. Come back here and paste it. And we will leave all of this the same. The only thing that we will have to do is figure out if I is an even number or an odd number, right? So let's do that here. So if I mod 2 is equal to 0, this means I is an even number. right? Otherwise, I is an odd number. So what will we have to do if I is an even number or if I is an odd number? We will calculate start and end, right? So according to whatever we have discussed, if I is an even number, the logic will remain the same, which means we'll grab this and we will paste it here. But if I is an odd number, we'll have to start from end and go all the way up to start, right? So let's grab this, paste here, and let's change this to start from end and go all the way up to start with a decrement of 1, right? So with just this change, if I run the code, we will get the output that we expected, which is 1, then 3, 2, then 4, 5, 6, then 10, 9, 8, 7, and then 11 to 15, which is what we wanted to print, right? So with this clear, let's move on to the next question, which is this. So this is what we are supposed to print. Now here, as you can see, what we are doing is we are printing either 0 or 1, right? So the next question is, how do we decide whether to print 0 or to print 1? So for that, let's take a look at the values of I and j and see if the values of I and j and what is getting printed over there gives us a hint as to how to proceed with this, right? So for I0 and J0, what are we printing is 1, right? So continuing, for I1 and J0, we're printing 0. For I1, J1, we're printing 1. And then if we continue, we will get for 2, 0, we're printing 1. For 2, 1, we're printing 0. And for 2, 2, we're printing 1. And if we continue the same way, what we will observe is when I plus j is an even number, what are we doing is we are printing 1 over there, right? And when I plus j is an odd number, we're printing 0. So all that we will have to do is calculate I plus j, divide by 2, check if it is even or not. So if it is even, what are we doing is we're printing 1. So we will print 1 over here, and if it is odd, we will print 0, right? So with this clear, let's come back to IntelliJ. Let's create a new Java class. Let's call it Q12. And let's grab the code, that is the main method from say Q1. Let's close this and paste it here. And what we will have to do is we'll have to first of all check if I plus j is an even number or an odd number, right? So if it is an even number, what we have to do is we have to print 1. If it is an odd number, we have to print 0. So if I run the code, what do we expect? We expect this 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, and so on. And because we had n is equal to 7, we are getting 7 rows. If I change it to 5, I'll get 5 rows with this, which is exactly what we expected to print, right? So with this clear, let's move on to the next and the last question. So this is what we're expected to print, right? Now, when we iterate the way we have been iterating, what we will get is this, then these two, then these three, these four, and lastly, these 5, right? Now, if you take a look at what we will get during iteration and what we have to print for each of them, you would notice that in the first row, we are printing 1 asterisk and we will get only 1 position, right? In the second row, we are printing 2 asterisk and we will get only 2 positions. In the third row, we will print 2 asterisks, the first one and the last one. The same thing applies to the fourth row. So we'll print asterisk in the first position and the last position. And in the fifth row, that is the last row, we will print asterisk in all of the positions, right? So if you observe this closely, you would notice that in the first row, in a way, and the last row, we are printing asterisk in all of the positions that we are going to get. In all of the other rows, that is starting from row number 2 all the way up to n minus 1, we are printing in the first and the last position, right? So can we handle this? Of course we can. What we can do is, given n, which is 5 in this case, we will take care of position 0 and position 4 separately, right? And for positions 1, 2, and 3, we will determine the first position and the last position and print asterisk only in those positions. Now, the next question is, how do we determine the first position and the last position? Well, the first position will always be when j is 0, right? For each of the row. And the last position will be when j will be equal to the row number. That is, assuming that row number is stored in I and it goes from 0 all the way up to n minus 1. So if I take the row number 1, the first position is 0, the last position is 1. If I take row number 2, first position is 0, last position is 2. For row number 3, first position is 0, last position is 3, right? So what we will have to do overall to solve this is, we'll have to handle position 0 and position n minus 1 separately. That is row number 0 and row number n minus 1 separately. And then for all the rows from 1 all the way up to n minus 2, including n minus 2, we'll have to print asterisk only when j is equal to 0 or j is equal to I, right? So with this clear, let's come back to IntelliJ. Let us close this. Let's create a new Java class, say Q13. And let's quickly copy the main method from Q12. Let's paste it here and let's get rid of this if else that we have, right? Now, what we had decided was we're going to handle the first row and the last row separately, which means we're going to start from 1 and go all the way up to and including n minus 2, right? Over here, what are we going to do is we're going to iterate the way we used to iterate, but we will print an asterisk if and only if the value of j is equal to 0 or is equal to I, right? So what we will do is we will check if j is equal to 0 or j equal to I. What are we supposed to do is print an asterisk, right? And in all the other cases, we are supposed to print a space. And since we are printing an asterisk over here and then a space, we will leave two spaces over here so that the alignment is proper. And here, let's add println. Now, there's still some portion left to be put as code, but let's run this code to check the output. And we've got these two asterisks over here, these two here, and these two here, right? So now, once we handle the first row and the last row, our solution will be complete, right? So for the first row, it is pretty simple. All we have to do is print one asterisk. And if I do that, okay, this is a little messed up because I should have put println over here. Because when we print this asterisk, I expect the cursor to move to the next line, right? So that the other line gets printed properly. And this is how it looks at the moment. Now, only the last row is left. So for the last row, what we should do is we should iterate for n number of times and then print n number of asterisks, right? Which means we'll need another loop over here and we'll say for int I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus, right? Because if we come back over here, we will see that for the last row, which is row number 4, given the value of n is 5, we are printing 5 asterisks, right? If the last row was, let's say, the 7th row, that is I was 7, we would have printed 8 asterisks, correct? So that is why we have this loop, which is for int I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. And all we will do here is print an asterisk with a space, and let's put an empty println statement over here, although that won't matter. And let's run the code. And this is what we got. And this seems to be working absolutely fine, right? So with this, we've solved this question as well. And this was the last question of the subcategory right angle triangle left align. And with this, we've come to the end of the video. I hope I've been able to teach you something new and useful. And if you have any suggestions, feedback, or queries, feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one where we will take up the left aligned inverted right angle triangle. So see you in the next one.